Welcome to the first meeting of the exceptions subgroup. Thank you for taking time to be on this call. I want to run through what we, staff at Michael Baker, understand this group is focused on, and then we're going to stop and if you all have additional issues, suggestions, things that you want this group to focus on. So the first part of this is we understand this effort is focused mainly on development standards that are creating impediments to existing cultivators, primarily, that would otherwise be able to receive permits and legally conduct commercial operations. But for some reason, the regulations are a stumbling block. We've heard very consistently that setbacks and minimum parcel sizes are among those impediments, and those would be very appropriate to address through exceptions. We think that that's the main focus of this group.
Hi, this is Paul and Susan.
Join the conference.
Thank you for joining us. We just got started going over the project understanding, so in a couple of minutes we'll ask if you all think we've got it right. So thank you for joining us.
Who do you have with you?
Susan Tippin.
Okay, so as I'm mentioning, we're focusing on exceptions, and we think that's primarily to development standards. As a rule, as a land planner, I'm very familiar with using exceptions for development standards. It is not typical to use exceptions to grant use rights that aren't otherwise allowed. It may be a situation where some use is not allowed because a parcel is too small, but within the overall district it would be allowed. That would be fine to consider, but I don't think that we're going to be in a position where we use exceptions to allow a manufacturing use in a zone where it otherwise is not allowed. Does that make sense? The difference between uses and development standards. And we'll touch on that in a minute and see if it's still on track to address your needs. We the exceptions is really applying on a county-wide level. It's not any specific district, or maybe exceptions will apply in certain designated districts, but it's not location-based. It's more wherever these conditions exist, this exception could be granted. So whereas the opt-in and opt-out groups are very much geography-based, they will be distinct little zones. These are regulation changes that apply at a county-wide level whenever the conditions described are present. We do think that the exceptions would be appropriate to use within an opt-out zone. I think you're all familiar with the concept that there are some neighborhoods that would like to not have any commercial cultivation. We not anticipate that the exceptions would be backdoor to then reintroduce commercial uses in an opt-out zone. So that we don't think that would be an appropriate use of the exceptions. The last thing is there are efforts underway with the county to amend the regulations more broadly. And this group may have some great ideas, don't quite fit within exceptions. Still talk those through, and then that will allow us to forward those thoughts to the appropriate working group. So it's not that there's any bad ideas, but there may be some good ideas that don't quite fit under exceptions, and try to redirect those to the right venue for consideration. So with all that said, I'd like to get an initial read on how close you think we are to the mark about what we're doing in exceptions, and is there anything that we're missing here? So this is kind of just luck of draw how you showed up on my list, but Monique, I'm gonna ask what your thoughts are. Any thoughts about, do we understand the project? Is there anything you want to add right now that we should be considering that wasn't discussed?
I think you're hitting it pretty right on. So it's really clear to me in terms of what exceptions will allow and what they won't.
Okay. Julia.
And I have lots of thoughts about the other section of the outline. But good job, thank you.
Okay. So nothing really overlooking. Amanda, any thoughts?
I agree with what the other respondents have said. I think it's always useful to get feedback from the broader base of farmers to make sure there aren't any issues we're missing. I know there's a lot of public comment that goes on to the Board of Supervisors, but, I think it's important that we don't overlook issues that farmers may be having, even if it's just affected one or two in our discussion.
Okay. Thoughts?
Well, more of a question, I guess, than a thought. So I know, listening to some of the recent conversation at the Board of Supervisors level regarding setbacks, there was sort of a conversation regarding, looking at maybe amendments to setbacks if there was only some sort of a natural buffer in place, whether that's a certain distance, whether that's a hillside or, those types of things. And so I guess that's one of my questions regarding, sort of coming up with an exception for setbacks and how those exceptions would be discussed with adjoining property owners if necessary.
Yeah, you're right squarely in the area that we expect to cover. We've heard things like you have a parcel and you're next to a 10-acre parcel and your neighbor's house is 500 feet away. The same setback still makes sense, and I think we'd all argue not really. It doesn't serve a benefit. And that will be whether it's hillside. Whether we heard another instance where there's a hillside virtual cliff separating uses, and so while you look at it in plan view, they seem to be right next to each other. In the physical world, they're completely removed. So those are really good cases for an exception, and that's a lot of what we'll be talking about is the setbacks, the parcel sizes, and these physical standards. Okay, I think rounding it out, Paul, any thoughts?
Well, I understand what was just said about the setbacks. I disagree, hopefully, actually, about the zoning thing. I see in the case of a micro business that there are already things in place with home occupations and with the, especially with the cottage industry, the use permit, that allow for actions to be done where they wouldn't ordinarily be zoned, manufactured. And that being said, a micro business is something completely different. This is an entirely new industry. This is an entirely new license, and trying to shoehorn them into something that's already existing is going to prove really problematic. Instead of creating a different, brand new license for this brand new industry, or at least it's new to the county as far as a legislature or an ordinance level. I would say that there's an opportunity to do that so that we can drive adoption and promote the black market. But micro business is set up so that for the small farmer, and is something that should be taken advantage of, rather than trying to use what's existing to prevent it from flourishing. I think the micro business should be allowed wherever there's cultivation allowed, and that is pretty clearly stated in the statute, I think, for the state, and we should try not to be as restricted. As far as the countywide and giving a broad brush for what might be allowable as an exception, by the very nature of the exception is that it needs to be site-specific. Whereas someone doesn't have electricity or internet access, those sorts of things have to come into play. And if you grant, an exception for that person because the existing conditions that are site specific, every condition is going to be different. It should be appealable to the applicant.
Okay, so let me get the last part. So I think we're on the same page as far as exceptions. They would be considered on a parcel by parcel basis. There would be a rule. Now, if I think you suggested maybe power generations, if somebody doesn't have power, I assume the thought there is allow them to use a generator, and that might be an exception. That's certainly something we can talk about. So that would be, where a parcel of a certain size doesn't have power, an exception can be granted to allow them to use a generator. I'm not sure whether that'll be supported, but that seems like a reasonable use of an exception to me. The concern with the micro business is I'd really like to see the county take that on, not in the exceptions, but just take that question on, because it's really an overarching question. We've heard from the opt-in group the problems with some of the more isolated communities have no ability to do any manufacturing, any processing, or any distribution, and that the regulations really don't how that's supposed to work. That rises out of the level of an exception to a development standard and really gets a little bit more at the heart of county's regulations. So I'm sure that something like changing how micro businesses are allowed is appropriate here. I think that's really a more fundamental shift of the regulations as compared to fixing where regulations are impacting individuals who want to cultivate. So we can keep that discussion going, Paul, and eventually we'll have to just ask the group what we want to take on and then go to the county. And so we're not saying no to anything, but just offering a little bit of feedback as we go. The other thing, Amanda, you mentioned the need to understand what the growers need out in the world, and I do want to, this was in the letter to you, but I want to reiterate it, that you are 6 people who are helping us in this effort, but we're expecting that you will be reaching out and talking with friends and fellow individuals involved with commercial cannabis and be bringing in those thoughts. So the reason we're going with a smaller group is we can be fairly nimble and we can really pull together work relatively quickly, but that does on you all to make sure you're thinking about the bigger issues in the county for any individuals who aren't here at the table with us. And so we are expecting that you'll be taking and busting ideas and helping us to really understand what the bird community needs and where the regulations are impacts on existing cultivators and existing businesses.
Oh, we already are.
Perfect. Okay.
Hi, morning. This is Susan Gibbon. I'm the other half of Lovingly and Legally with Paul Hansberry. I'd like to speak briefly about that issue because that is what we've been engaged in for the last year or so. And the elephant in the room is that for literally thousands of small cottage or home industries, and those people can continue to make value-added products, much as the wholesale price for cannabis is going down. We're seeing adoption at much lower rates than we had all hoped for. So if we want to drive adoption, which we must do in order to make the county viable, as would save these people's businesses that they've been doing for generations, I think going to Paul Hansberry's comment about micro business, we understand that this is more devolved to the Board of Supervisors of the county. Unless we're able to people that and drive micro business, assure people that they can continue to make value-added products, we're just not going to see the adoption that we need in this program. So I'd like to be able to work together with the board to ensure that people can get exceptions where they have been making value-added products and absolutely need to continue to do so.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Susan. Are you part of the subgroup? I just want to make sure that my notes are correct.
I am, and that probably was just a clerical error. It's Susan, S-U-S-A-N, Tibbon, T-I-B-B-O-N.
Then I want everyone to realize we are halfway through our meeting, but not yet 25% through our agenda. So as much as important as this topic is and as many thoughts as we have on it, we have to be brief and concise at this time to get through our entire agenda so Paul and I and Bella can really do our work this week.
Yeah, but yes, thank you, Mark, and thank you for all the comments. I think the next item, we've already been talking about the exceptions versus overall code revisions. And I think this is something we will come back to, particularly with this discussion of microbusiness and what that means. We will also circle back with county staff on this particular issue to see if we're understanding correctly what the edges of our job is. And our job as Michael Baker definitely has edges. So we'll discuss with the county about the ability to address some of these use questions and where they should be addressed. Moving down the list, this is not very different than what we just talked about, but the general parameters of exceptions, and we would like to talk this through. Exceptions are usually about standards, something measurable. You can have a certain number of square feet of cultivation if you're in a zone. You need to have this many feet set back from your property line for cultivation if you're in this zone. You can do cultivation unless your parcel size is this size. These standards are measurable, they're objective, and they're pretty easy to say you comply or you don't comply. The problem being that the crafting of these standards can never consider all of the unique situations of individual properties, of the shapes of parcels, of the size of parcels, the settings of parcels. But what we're really talking about are these measurable standards. And we all understand that if we're going down this road, granting of an exception has to be an easy process. It can be expensive, it can't be time-consuming, and it can't be controversial. So we're imagining that exceptions will be something that gets reviewed at the administrative level. I think there was some discussion of wanting to make sure they're appealable if they're denied, and yes, any staff action is appealable, and we will put in provisions in the code about that. We'll reference the code, but typically staff's decisions are appealable to the Planning Commission, and Planning Commission's decisions are appealable to the board. But ideally, when these exceptions come in, they will be processed quickly and in a fairly inexpensive manner, because we're trying not to create barriers to participation. So is everybody kind of getting the gist here? Is there anything we wanted to discuss on that? I just went over.
This is Monique, and I just wanted to make sure, too, that I know with the opt-in group, we're just speaking about cultivation, and I want to know if the exceptions group is also being addressed in the same way. So this would only be applying to cultivation applicants, not people trying to get a different type of license that's non-cultivation related.
I don't think that's correct, Monique, in that somebody is on a piece of property that otherwise would allow manufacturing, processing, distribution, but there's something about their property that's holding them back. then I think the exception would be appropriate there. Again,
Okay, great.
we're trying to address uses that would be otherwise allowed, but regulations are creating a barrier. So,
So for cultivation and non-cultivation.
yes,
Well,
but,
Yes, under
but
4C.
what was that?
This is Julia. It's under 4C on the agenda. I'm trying to stick to the agenda.
Okay. That is a question that we'll be asking, but I think this is a fast evolving thought process. But I think that's where we land is that we're really going to look at what uses would be allowed on the property. If it happens to be something other than cultivation, and the development standards are creating an impediment, then that's fair game for us to discuss. Okay, anybody else?
Thank you.
Thoughts about how exceptions and development standards relate?
I was wondering, this is Paul Hansberry. I'm wondering, with regards to, say, that might have been a good issue, such as setbacks, setbacks.
Sorry, I didn't quite understand. Such as what?
Just setbacks, because we talked about setbacks quite a bit, so let's continue setbacks. If there's a setback, say you've got a building that's too close to the property line, or your garden is not set back properly, but your neighbor is fine with that, and he gives you a letter that he doesn't mind, and let's go even a step further and say that letter would be revocable if he told his piece, or potentially revocable or renewable to if the property and the new owner would have to either agree or could rescind that permission for that. This would be something that, would tail in with your overlays, as long as this is something that wouldn't affect the neighborhood, everyone is fine with, and it would be an exception to what is in black and white in this ordinance.
Paul, this is Mark. Something that we're going to start to talk about in the next section is, so when you're trying to achieve a setback, some sort of relief, or an exception, some sort of relief from the setbacks that are on your property, we're going to just in a couple minutes talk about what might be the requirements to get that exception. And I think that that's a great idea, that there's a possibility one of those things could be some sort of some recognition from a neighboring property owner that could possibly be impacted by that reduced setback. And that's something that we are going to discuss.
I'm sorry.
This is Julia Carrera. I'm just concerned about time. I'm wondering if I have about 6 other items under 4E, and make sure that we're going to get to that. Otherwise, I'd like to give them to you for the end of the meeting.
Well, I think if there's no other questions about how exceptions and standards relate, I think we can move on to number 4. And this is really the heart of what we're doing is, what are the problems out there, right? What are stumbling blocks? What are the impediments? And I think, I'm going to take my breath and let you guys talk on this one. So what we're really interested in is, I want to go through the list, through the group, and hear what you view as the stumbling blocks and the things that we want to take on within exceptions. And Julia, I jumped out there, so let's go ahead and hear what you got.
I appreciate that. In addition to parcel size restrictions and stack requirements, which we will be getting into particulars about, what I find over the last 9 years with what's existed and what the current regulations are inhibiting is, number one, the relocation and exchange process. And get into particulars when we get there. Number 2, the
Julie, one second. Relocation and what?
exchange.
Julie, is that a situation where an existing site is in an area that might be environmentally detrimental, and the county or the applicant is looking to cultivation site somewhere else, or manufacturing or processing area somewhere else? Are you talking about that?
Component. The other one is it's not allowed in that zoning.
Oh, but the key is
Or
create in a new location and eliminate in the previous. Okay, go ahead. Next.
Transferability. And then, and that would be someone has an existing permit and life forces them to have to sell, and they can't improve their property to functionality because once you sell your property, you can't transfer. Nobody can grow this, and the county's calling it transfer.
So is it transfer of a permit when property sells, or is it more than that?
More than that, but that's an example.
Next.
And the administrative permit requirement for people that have never been permitted before. They've never actually been in the process, but they're required to pay $400 for an administrative permit because they're now more than what was legal because that's what the permit requires. But of course, you get administrative permit, which financially is an uphill and they can't move forward.
So it's just the requirement for an administrative permit, or it's the price for the what's the hurdle here? And when does it apply?
And the administrative permit applies in various situations, but the one I'm addressing that I think is the obstacle to there is what the obstacles to people getting into regulation. And this one, they cannot afford the administrative permit to grow more than 6 plants.
Next one.
And then, yes, parcel sizes we're going to get to, and that is land, forest land, and TPZ land as it relates to transfer and relocation and extinguish. The larger subject matter there.
Rangeland, TPZ, what else? Land.
Yeah.
I apologize for asking. There's a fair amount of kind of background noise coming through.
No problem. And then the next one is the exceptions for sunset. Residential parcels that are 3 acres or less. Because that will put people out of business, and that relates to the transfer also and relocation and extinguish. And as Paul Hansberry pointed out, appeals. We need to have an appeals process, which in my opinion falls into exception.
Okay. We get those down, and you will and have a chance if we missed anything to say didn't quite get something right. So now
Thank you.
Move the list. Monique, what do you got for us? Any thoughts beyond what's been discussed?
Yeah, I would say in terms of an exception example would be someone with acreage that is really close to what's allowed. So let's say they have 9.75 acres. They're zoned to be able to continue with cultivation, but they have to have 10 acres in order to do the 10,000 square foot cultivation site. So they're really close, or there's some parcels that are 4.99 acres. So, I mean, we're talking about 0.01. And I think that definitely should be exceptions for that. And I think if we could create some sort of parameter, like if you're within this percentage off from being allowed, then we would allow you to move forward. That could be an easy exception that could be granted across the whole county. And then, yeah, during setbacks, neighbors that are in common. They're both doing the same activity. I know Paul Hansberry spoke to this earlier. I think that's another great example of a setback issue that could easily be resolved if we had some sort of platform with a letter or, something like that that could be presented. So those are the only two that I can really think of just right off the top of my head for an example of an exception, but I know there's a lot of other issues, but those are the two.
Well, we'll be
now.
spending
Thank
more
you.
time digging into these, so thank you. All right, moving down the list, Amanda, what do you got for us?
Well, I just wanted to second what Julia said. I think she had a really nice comprehensive list. But then I also want to say I think we need some kind of avenue for people who aren't covered by everything we come up with. So again, we can collect as much information as we possibly can on what folks need, but there's always going to be someone that has this really unique situation. So I think there needs to be a pathway for someone to petition for exception, even if it's not currently covered by the topics we come up with. And then that way we can protect against someone getting left out inadvertently.
Do you think an appeal process is the process, or do you think there's another process there?
Well, I think it's an appeal process, but I would like it to be not onerous. Like I almost feel like I want it to the onus to be on the county to tell someone why it's not appropriate. They feel it is appropriate. So however we set that up, I'd want it, to be more, I don't want the person to have to jump through a million hoops to prove that they're okay. Rather than submit something to say they think they're okay, and then the onus be the county to tell them why they're not.
Jump in about that. I think.
Wait. Paul, hold on. We're moving kind of quickly here, and we're trying to take notes so we can have a clear understanding of what the desires are for the group. And we had Amanda just come through there, and she agreed with everything Julia said. And we also need to cover anyone that might not be included in all of the parameters that Julia and Monique have listed. And she finished by saying that she feels the onus needs to be on the county to tell an applicant why they are not, why they can't get approval. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I think Paul's up next.
Yes, I wanted to go a little bit further with what they were just talking about. Instead of it being an appeal process, something that happens after you're refused or denied, I think that I call it a pre-appeal. So put together in your business plan that you can demonstrate that you're not going to impact the neighborhood or the environment, but you are going to be, for instance, just off the top of my head, let's say that you are a nursery, and a very small nursery. You don't need the 10,000 or 20 or 12,000 square feet. But you're a seed nursery, and you've only got 5 acres. And you in your business plan exactly how you intend to do this so that it wouldn't be impacting the neighborhood, the community, or the environment, that's looked at at the application process instead of the appeal process. And if it makes sense, in order, the person be able to move forward with that based on the application instead of drawing out to an appeal process. The appeal process would be a second line of defense to try to appeal the thing, but I think that if you can handle it at the application level, you streamline the process considerably.
Okay. Got that. We haven't heard
I'm not sure. Mark, could we that a little bit more? I'm not sure if you're describing you want a pre-application consultation or what are you trying to get here? I'm not exactly how this works yet.
Let's just use an example. There's going to be thousands of them, but an example. But say someone wants to have a seed nursery, right? And just wants to do it on a very small scale. He doesn't need to expound, the limits of the definition of a nursery. So, but now, in order to have a nursery license, you need 10 acres or more. So he has 5 acres, but he can demonstrate that he's keeping his business on a smaller scale, that he'd be allowed to do this small thing. He can demonstrate that his plan is not violating the impact to the community or the neighborhood or environmentally, that those should be taken into consideration and not just, hey, well, you're 10 acres, you're less than 10 acres, you're denied.
Paul, I'm gonna agree with you absolutely that a seed nursery, if nursery requires 10 acres or more, and somebody comes in and we create an exception that says, but if you're only a seed nursery and you're not selling plants, you can be on a smaller parcel, that's a good exception. I don't think we can just have an open-ended, there's no objection, anything can be okay. I think it's going to be on us to identify those situations like great distinction, seed nursery versus a larger nursery, real good example. And the more we can pick off those big examples, we're going to fix it for everybody. But if we eliminate 90% of the stumbling blocks, we will have done the county and the community a great service. But I don't think we're ever going to be able to say anything that seems okay, because that essentially wipes out the county regulations. And you know, I've been down this road a lot of times with economic development, not with cannabis, but this is a classic discussion in economic development. So I hope you get the distinction that if we can identify where we're stumbling, and so that's great, but I don't think a wild card get out of jail free if nobody objects. I'm kind of overcharacterizing that there, but...
This is Julia, and I think that what Paul is talking about would be good under parcel sizes, and we can divide them out into cultivating, nursery, manufacturing, all of that stuff.
Right. Yeah.
We can lump a lot of things into.
Okay,
Yeah,
Paul, anything else?
I think that expecting that we're going to be able to get every situation covered, and I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a get out of jail free, but I'd say that if you could demonstrate in your application that it does make sense and that it furthers the intent of the industry, where you're not going to be able to cover everything in this ordinance. There has to be some sort of latitude. And I think it's done at the application review process that is demonstrated. You have the approval letters or the good neighbor letters or whatever. That should be a consideration, and not a get jail free, just common sense and flexibility.
I think that's very similar to something we heard earlier about a flexible exception, because we can't hit every possible exception. We'll think about that and what we can bring forward. I want to make sure everybody has a chance on this one. Devin, do you have any thoughts to add on here?
A few. I mean, I guess my questions, and again, you know, looking at multiple perspectives coming from this, I do think that, you know, appeals process of some sort would be beneficial. I guess my question would be what that would look like in different some of our existing processes through the planning department for appeals. So that's my first question. Within that appeals process, you know, if you do have a situation where you perhaps don't have a adjoining property or an agreement with that project, were all voices heard potentially during that appeals process? So that's one question. You know, and certainly, I mean, I guess we're also looking at how some of these exceptions are developed, especially in concern to rangeland, forest land, TPC, and ag zoning, just because, again, we could see situations where, you know, potential expansions or those types of scenarios may create impacts for existing adjoining land uses related to our, you know, timber industry at all. And where we are looking at that from that perspective. And, you know, finally, I guess, you know, I don't know where this is going to come forward, but a lot of the concerns that's been brought to my attention is how sort of the additional overlays and exemptions may or may not play into looking at the existing negative deck that was performed with the ordinance. So, you know, staying within those parameters, I guess those will be some of my questions.
And those are not questions we're answering today. They're great questions.
Susan.
I echo the unique situations of applicants putting together a plan which justifies their need for an exception. And if possible, we'd like to see a time window attached to that, particularly since many people are facing, nature, the growing season. So, for instance, if an applicant has an issue, once their justifications are submitted, we'd like to see, 7 to 14-day working 14 days, so that they're not sort of left hanging for, months at a time.
And let's see, Jude never got on the call, right? Okay. So I see we've run through the group. Does anybody not have a chance to share thoughts? Okay. Okay. So I think we've run through the group. Does anybody not have a chance to share thoughts? Hold on.
Got to open.
Has joined the conference.
Somebody has maybe a computer and a phone running at the same time? Cleared up.
That
Okay.
was Amanda. Yeah, I just had to switch my phone because I had to walk out the door.
Okay.
Perfect. We got you clear. Okay. All right. Mark, go ahead.
So we're gonna process these notes. Like we said, we'll have the recording will be sent back to the county. They will put that on their website so people can listen to the meeting, or you guys can listen to the meeting. We'll also have action minutes from this meeting that we'll send out to the group for your review. If you see something on there that you think we missed or that you'd like us to flesh out a little bit more, please feel free to let us know, and we'll revise the notes. During the week, feel free to email us and email the group, and I will get to you, or Paul will get back to you, and we can have some limited discussion. We'd prefer everyone to be included on discussions, so that we are all covering ground at the same time. And at point, this was a really great first meeting. We have a lot to do, and kind of time to do it. Does a Friday meeting time work for everybody?
I really like meeting time. This worked great for me.
Okay.
Julia?
Julia, thank you.
Yeah, this is Amanda. It works for me as well.
Okay.
This Hansberry, yes, it's fine.
Okay. All right. So we send out a meeting invite for this time next Friday, and we will have some responses. There'll be these things we need to discuss internally. If it's possible to do these things, we will discuss with staff, and we'll be a little bit further down the road this time next week. We are also going to start to draft a framework for we think this ordinance or this to the ordinance will look like. I don't know if we'll get that framework out to you this week, but it'll certainly be coming to you the following week at latest. But it's something we're going to start working on, and if we can get it done prior to next Friday, we'll get it out to you. But it sounds like we have some big questions that we still want to settle before then.
Yeah, just I'm not sure that I heard from Monique or Devin on this time as a going forward time. Does this work?
This is Devin.
Yes, it will work.
Friday.
All right, Devin?
Yes, this is Devin. Most Friday mornings would work.
Monique?
This will work.
Excellent.
And I just got an email about Jude, and she said that she thought the meeting was at 10 o'clock, and the number she was calling wasn't working, so I got.
I'm not sure what the glitch there was, but I saw that message as well. So what we'll do,
Okay.
Our commitment to you is when somebody misses the meeting, we will work to catch you up, but we can't have lots of misses. We're going to be moving pretty fast, and we can't spend a lot of time catching up members. You're going to miss meetings. We get that, and we'll make sure you get caught up. But really ask that you make sure to every effort to try to take part in each scheduled call. Want to thank you very much. This was probably the most lively out of the gates conversation we've had. So this is going to be fun. We're enjoying working with all of you, and we'll be talking next week at the same time. Thanks much.
Can I ask a closing question?
Yep.
I know if this exceptions piece is going to be rolled in with the opt-in and opt-out, well, this can be accelerated and brought to the board so it can be adopted sooner than later for people that need it.
I don't see this going faster, to be honest. This is probably the most complicated charge. Secondly, the opt-in, and the easiest one is the opt-out. But our work ahead of us, I don't see us really moving faster.
I think we've gone through the group. Does anybody not have a chance to share thoughts?
Has a conference.
All right.
We do.
Everyone.
Thanks much, everyone.
Has left conference.
Bye.
Julia Herrera.
Left